From the Hill Country in Texas, this is OneRadioNetwork.com.
Talk to Patrick now, 888-663-6386, or email patrick@oneradionetwork.com.
Alrighty, 888-663-6386. Patrick at OneRadioNetwork.com is our email address if you'd like to join us for the show. We're going to have fun here this next hour talking to Walter Cruttenden. Very interesting fellow. He's director of the Binary Research Institute in Newport Beach, California. He's author of the book Lost Star of Myth and Time. He's produced documentary films, written a lot of articles. He regular podcast series, The Cosmic Influence, and they got a big conference coming up, CPAC, C-P-A-K, in early October that he can tell you about in case you want to go. And they talk about some pretty wild stuff, the sun and the solar system and stars. Mr. Cruttenden, good morning to you.
Good morning. How are you?
Well, great. I was just looking and thinking that the Earth just goes around the sun 360. Well, then I read your website and I go, uh-oh, am I wrong here? I mean, this is pretty interesting, this work that you're doing. The fact that you're saying that the time that we believe that the Earth going around the sun is actually a little bit, not much, but different from what we've always believed?
Well, the Earth does indeed go around the sun, no question about that.
We know that.
But at the same time, the solar system doesn't just stand still. And so this is something that ancient civilizations had hinted at, that there was another movement. And modern astronomy seems to just be catching up now to recognize, indeed, the solar system does move. And if it does, it implies that this old myth and folklore about a long-lost cycle of the ages might have some basis in reality. And so that's what we study at the Binary Research Institute.
Long-lost cycle of ages, meaning that how close we are and the speed and all that affects our consciousness and who we are as a culture?
It appears to have some effect, yes, and I don't think anyone is exactly sure how it works, but, you know, just as the Earth spins on its axis and it affects our consciousness because our bodies are adapted to the light of the sun, and so when we're in a waking state, you know, we function outwardly, and when we're away from the sun, our bodies have adapted to go into a subconscious state or sleep. And likewise, as the Earth goes around the sun in its revolution, 365 days, it changes completely. You know, with plants springing out of the ground, blooming, giving their fruit, then decaying again. Other things coming out of hibernation or spawning and migrating in mass. You know, it literally affects trillions of life forms, and yet we're hardly thinking about it because it's so ordinary. And so, indeed, if there is a third motion where the Earth is carried with the whole solar system around another star, as more scientists are starting to believe, then, in fact, it might give some real scientific underpinning to this idea that consciousness or life moves in this grand cycle with alternating dark and golden ages that Plato called the Great Year.
Wow, the Great Year. I've heard of the idea of the Great Yuga, where it'd be like, I don't know, 5 millions and millions, where the whole thing just kind of goes away and then sleeps and then rebuilds and then it starts all over again.
Yes,
that concept, is that the great? Do they call it the Grand Yuga or something?
Well,
like
the Indian culture does call this cycle the Yuga cycle.
Yuga,
Y-U-G-A.
Right.
That's correct. And just like the Greeks, they broke it into 4 periods, ascending and descending. You know, we're all familiar with the Greeks, the Iron, Bronze, Silver, and Golden Age.
Sure.
And then they go back the other way. But the Yugas, they called them the Kali Yuga.
Kali Yuga, yeah.
the Dwapara, Treta, and Satya Yugas. And it's the same thing, and indeed, you're right, they do have an even longer cycle, which is apparently the whole stellar neighborhood moving around something. But that one is so long that it's tough to find in the archaeological record, and we're interested in the one that, there's actually some evidence behind, and so that's the cycle we're studying.
Yeah. So you're studying a cycle that is greater than a year, and then that changes things?
Yes. It lasts roughly 24,000 years, or one precession of the equinox, and that's pegged at anywhere from 22 to 26,000 years, depending whether you're talking about, precession of the perihelion or precession of the equinox. And this is the one the Greeks seem to refer to as the great year, and the Indians as the Yuga cycle, and many other cultures too just made sort of passing references to this long-lost golden age and a cycle of time.
So do you? Is there a astronomical paradigm to back up the idea, Mr. Cruttenden, that things do go from like the gold and silver, where there's more wars, there's more this, there's more that, and into, which I believe we're in the Kali Yuga now, which gets pretty rough down in this Kali Yuga. And, is there some kind of correlation there that astronomically that you can say, yeah, well, that makes sense?
Yes, there is, but it's sort of been misinterpreted over, basically through and since the Dark Ages. Just as, in the time of the medieval ages, many people thought the Earth was flat or didn't spin, or that the stars went around the Earth rather than the Earth going around the sun. And then Copernicus came along and sort of straightened that out. Well, likewise, it's just been until recently that many believe the solar system didn't move. And the reason that belief sort of stuck there for so long was because Copernicus, in order to sort of make sense of things, put the sun in the center of the universe, and he couldn't very well go ahead and have the sun also moving. And so Newton came along after Copernicus. Copernicus gave us three motions of the Earth, the spinning on its axis, the revolution around the sun, and what he called wobble. And Newton said, well, gee, if the Earth does indeed wobble, it must be due to the gravity of the sun and the moon tugging on the oblate Earth, and gave a very long explanation and equation to explain it. Of course, his equation didn't work, so it's been modified more than 100 times since. And what that equation tries to explain is this celestial phenomena called the precession of the equinox, where if you look at the position of the sun relative to background stars on the equinox each year, you notice that the sun has moved about 50 arc seconds per year. And at that rate, it takes roughly 26,000 years. And that is the observable of this cycle, but many people still believe it's simply due to the wobbling Earth and that the sun doesn't actually move. And we're trying to show that, no, the sun really does move, and yes, the Earth does have a few little wobbles, Chandler wobble and nutation from the moon, but believe me, the sun is moving at a great speed through space, as most of the stars are, because most stars are in binary or multiple or, complex relationships with other stars.
So mainstream America scientists, NASA and the rest, is it in what's taught in schools that the sun is just sitting just right there, doesn't go anywhere?
That is what's used for the equations called the lunisolar equations to determine the Earth's wobble. They effectively constrain motion of the sun to zero.
Huh.
Now, there's a whole bunch of different departments of science, and everybody doesn't always talk to each other, but yes, many branches do realize now that the sun moves, but because some branches constrain it to no motion, it's assumed that the sun moves almost not at all or very little, and so it's not used in many equations. Whereas we find that, no, in fact, it does move quite a bit. And indeed, there's some very good scientists now, great astronomers that are looking for a companion star to the sun, something that the sun may be moving around. And I'm happy to get into some of those.
Yeah, we want to know about. So that's called that's why your website, Binary?
Yes, yeah. So we call the name of the institute the Binary Research Institute, and the website is binaryresearchinstitute.org. And that's where we study this phenomenon, because we believe, indeed, the sun isn't just sort of wandering aimlessly through space any more than the planets are. The planets go around the sun. Well, likewise, most stars out there have companion stars. It's believed up to 80% of all stars are in companion, trinary, or multiple star relationships.
Either moving around or hanging out with, or some kind of relationship?
Yeah, most of them in, fairly defined periodicities where they'd go around them in, 50 years, which is the ratio of how Sirius B moves around Sirius A, or thousands of years, some distant binary star systems. And we haven't really figured them all out. I mean, really, it's just been the last 50 years or so that astronomers have really been trying to count and catalog these things, a long time ago, because it takes a long time of observation to realize that two stars in the skies aren't just actually two stars sitting there, that they're actually rotating each other.
So you think that the sun is then rotating around another star?
Yeah, I should say revolving.
Revolving.
Yes.
What's the difference?
Well, rotation is generally used to define the movement on its axis. Say the Earth rotates on its axis, that gives us a day, whereas revolution, it goes around the sun. And so, yes, there appears to be just tons of these stars out there with companion stars. I mean, they like companions more than people do. And so it begs the question, why wouldn't our own sun have a companion star? And indeed, that's what more and more people are starting to look for.
And then why is this significant to us Earthlings down here trying to figure this out?
Because it appears to be the causative factor in this cycle. And there's a lot of people that, historians, anthropologists, that sort of thing, that will acknowledge that, yes, there is a lot of myth and folklore about a long-lost golden age. It's a common myth to over 30 ancient cultures. Egyptian, Mesopotamian, Indian, Greek, as we talked about, etc. But they just kind of consider it one of these universal myths, like a flood myth, and it probably really didn't happen. And I think the evidence will show pretty clearly before very long that, no, there's a real good scientific basis for this myth, and therefore we should, start to take some of them seriously and look at the types of phenomena they're referring to when they talk about this long-lost golden age.
19 minutes after the hour. Well, goodness knows, Mr. Cruttenden, we could use a little golden age right now in 2012, can we? Sure, man. BinaryResearchInstitute.org. And my name is Patrick Timpone. That's his website. If you'd like to join us, 888-663-6386. Email patrick@oneradionetwork.com. Well, I've seen this, going back to the Yuga idea, read about this for many, many years, where you have the Golden Age and the Silver Age, right, and the Iron Age and the Iron Age, copper and then iron, right? But it's hundreds of thousands of years, according to do you think do you think that those numbers are at all accurate? I mean, I think the whole yuga is like I said, I think it's like 8 million years or something like that.
Yeah, that's mostly a misinterpretation from the Dark Ages. There's a Indian scholar and astronomer that talks about that. His name is Swami Sri Yukteswar, and he wrote a book in 1894 where he actually said the sun takes some star for its dual and goes around it in about 24,000 years, and this produces the backward motion of the equinoctial points. And, of course, that's the phenomena you see with the precession of the equinox. And he explains in there that, this is a 24,000-year cycle with 12,000 years ascending, 12,000 years descending, but that during the Dark Ages it was misinterpreted. And he gets into exactly what scholars misinterpreted, why they did, and they expanded it because of, basically some incorrect beliefs and interpretations. And so it got mixed up with this even longer cycle. There's an Indian name for it, Manavatra or something like that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I've seen that word.
Right, and so that's how it all got lumped into this multi-million year thing. And indeed, there probably is some long cycle like that. But again, I don't know how we'd ever see evidence of that versus, 12,000 years up, 12,000 years down. You're going to notice some things over 500 or even 1,000 years. And in fact, that's exactly what we notice, Before the Dark Ages, all these great civilizations are in decline. And then since the Dark Ages, we're sort of all creeping out of it. And, it's manifesting as technology and longer lifespans and better medicine and foods and et cetera. And we just attribute it to evolution, which, clearly species adapt and that sort of thing. But it doesn't explain why everything's sort of unadapted prior to,
why it went the other way.
Ages. Yeah, exactly. And so we think there's something else going on there in addition to evolution, and that is this cycle. It just goes on in the background just like the day and the year do.
And it's called the Great Year.
Exactly. Yeah, that was the Greeks' term, and I think that's a good term, and so that's what we used. I've got a film out on it. It's narrated by James Earl Jones called The Great Year, and then we have a new children's book on it also
cool.
Called The Great Year Adventures with Tommy the Time-Traveling Turtle.
Tommy the Time-Traveling Turtle. It's a nice way to introduce the kids to this kind of stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, we think it's such an important thing to remember. This is part of our history, and often history is taught in a way that they have this notion that anything that came before us must be more primitive, and so we almost denigrate a lot of these early cultures. And I think we have a lot to learn from ancient cultures and how they lived in attunement with land without a lot of chemical factories and refineries and things like that long before the Dark Ages. And I really believe we should study that, and in fact that's what we do at our annual conferences.
I see. So the Dark Ages, when were those?
So most scholars would put the classical Dark Ages sort of beginning with the fall of Rome, sort of probably 400 AD, and say that they lasted roughly 1,000 years into about the time of Copernicus, and then the great discoveries of the Renaissance. As a matter of fact, Renaissance is a French word for rebirth of the cycle. Rebirth is what Renaissance means. And so this was a common belief at the time that a cycle existed, and it's only in the last few hundred years that we've kind of said, no, there's no cycle, we're just going up. But the actual cycle would be we'd put the low point at 500 AD, so it coincides very well with classical scholars, but recognize that many cultures are in steep decline well before this time. You look at Mesopotamia, Sumer, Akkad, Babylon, tremendous knowledge of astronomy, mathematics. They have underground plumbing, which didn't come back to Europe, by the way, till the 1800s. Sewer systems and, hot water baths and things like that. And Egypt and the Indus Valley, Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, they're building with uniform building products, also indoor plumbing. And, everyone knows that Egypt was at their height thousands of years before the Dark Ages. And in many of these places, Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, Egypt, etc., they're actually not just a slightly lower civilization, they are nomadic tribes by the time of the Dark Ages. It goes completely in the opposite direction.
What do you mean? I lost you on the nomadic tribes in the opposite direction. We're going down sort of to the low point of 500 AD, and then kind of back up consciousness.
Right. So we kind of all these great civilizations, including China and the Americas, are falling prior to the Dark Ages, or completely collapsing during the Dark Ages. I mean, the Mayan civilization pretty much blew up in the midst of the Dark Ages, and then then the trend seems to reverse. Instead of consciousness being incapable of building societies anymore, or developing new mathematics, or they're literally burning books in the Darker Ages. Then people start to appreciate knowledge once again, and it seems to slowly but surely grow with the Renaissance. And so yes, I had always wondered where our system of time came from, with 12 hours of AM increasing light and 12 hours of PM increasing darkness. And when I saw this picture of the great year in sort of a zodiacal form, where the sun moves through the 12 constellations, I realized that that's it. Our system of time, 24 hours, 12 a.m., 12 p.m., is an exact microcosm of the great year, which has 12,000 years ascending and 12,000 years descending. That seems to be where it came from. We can only trace it back to Mesopotamia and Egypt, but I bet they got it from the Great Year, because it's identical.
And that's when we go through the whole 12 zodiacs.
Yeah.
And we go back and forth.
Yeah, the sun actually does move through those zodiacs. If you observe it on the equinox each year, you'll see over 24,000 years, you'll start at one point and it'll end up in another. So, people will say nowadays at the vernal equinox, the spring equinox, the sun is in Pisces at the dawning of the age of Aquarius, moving into Aquarius. And indeed it is. All astronomers will recognize that. And but again, some will say, well, it just looks like it is because the Earth is wobbling, but the sun doesn't really move. And, of course, the sun really does move.
Yeah. All right, stay right there. Walter Cruttenden is with us. His website is binaryresearchinstitute.org. And this is Patrick Timpone. Hope you're enjoying the show half as much as I am. If you are, we're in good shape. Here we have an email here. Ask Walter, does this mean that we're headed toward a fall in our civilization? Well, this email is ahead of me. That was next on my list. So that was my question. Where are we, Mr. Cruttenden, in this, Cruttenden, Cruttenden, by binaryresearchinstitute.org. Where are we in this cycle now? If I'm doing my math, it seems like we're getting ready to top out.
Well, we're in the ascending phase.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, so it's it's like about 6:30 a.m. in the morning. I mean, we're just barely out of the darkness, waking up, if you will. The way to tell time on the celestial clock is you just have the 12 zodiacal signs. These are the constellations that are fairly evenly spread around the Earth within about 8% of the ecliptic. And just put them flat on a piece of paper, and then the sun at the autumnal equinox, that's the first day of fall, sort of acts as the hour hand. And so we've just, coming out of Virgo towards Leo. So, we're just coming out of the bottom of the clock, if you will, starting to move up in this cycle.
So let's see, and this would be the daytime, which would be the more positive, if you will, or ascending, creative, and that would be all of the daylight hours, right?
Yeah, so we're
just getting started here with the good stuff.
We're just getting started. Yeah, the Romans
like
had a very interesting icons for showing where we are in the ages, and so they had in a lot of these Mithraic temples that they're digging up around Europe, they have two boys. One holds a torch up and one holds a torch down. And you'll see the one holding the torch up is usually on this side of the zodiac where we are right now, and it just means that light is starting to come back into the world. And that's pretty cool. Yeah, it's a good time, and you can see it, Patrick. You can, like in our technology, for example, and I'm not saying that gizmos and gadgets prove that we're at the pinnacle, but just being able to invent the sorts of things that we're inventing now is a sort of a manifestation of increasing cleverness, whether or not we're using these things correctly. But, in math and science and many fields, medicine, things are getting better. I was listening to one of your commercials on the break where you were talking about a protein, an Amish protein. I didn't know.
One world way, right.
Yeah, and, sounded very interesting. It reminded me of this amazing discovery that they made in Brazil. It's called Terra Preta do Indio, the black soil of the Indians there. And when the Indian tribes come across this, they get very excited, and they'll find it in plots that might be, say, 2 hectares on average. And the reason they get excited because they know that if they put plants in this type of soil, they'll get about twice the growth rate of the plant and about twice the crop yield, say, for papaya, cash crops. And so it's really exciting, and it's been studied by Cornell University. And
what's the name of it again?
It's called Terra Preta, Terrapreta.
Yeah.
And you can Google it. And Cornell's find that it's like a yogurt-type substance with 5 billion living organisms per cubic centimeter. So it's a soil that's alive.
Wow.
And as long as you don't take too much of it away, it will just replenish itself. And it does amazing things for agriculture. And what's astounding is that even though we've been studying this soil now for 20 years, and it clearly dates to several thousand years ago, well before the Dark Ages, because they find pottery associated with these sites that they find it in, we still do not know how to recreate it today. We do not know how the ancients created this soil.
Oh, you think they actually made this stuff like a compost?
That appears to be what's going on, because it doesn't appear to be natural in other places, and you find it's always in places where there's some evidence of civilization.
5 billion microbes per centimeter?
Per cubic centimeter, yeah. So it's it's a yogurt type thing with all these tiny.
I want to eat some of that. Dirt. I mean, it's kind of like and I bet it's real black. It's
you can, again, on the internet, you can go and you can see pictures compared to the regular jungle soil, which is not very nutritious, and versus these plots that they find. And then you can see a map of exactly where they find them and near these archaeological sites, and it's pretty amazing stuff. And this is, again, the sort of thing, it's not just me studying this. We have a bunch of scientists, archaeologists, anthropologists, geologists that get together once a year at this conference on precession and ancient knowledge, and we all present our findings. And so this is where you hear about things like that. And the next one will be this October in Rancho Mirage, October 5th to 7th, and public's invited to come to the conference if they're interested.
And they can look on your website and get the info on that.
Yeah, I'll have to put a banner on our front page because I forgot, but or they can just go to cpaconline.com, cpakonline.com. Which stands for Conference on Precession and Ancient Knowledge.
So I'm wondering, you've been studying this terra preta. So if you mix it with other soil, it won't grow and just do something else?
So indeed, people do mix it with other soil to get a richer soil. But in its, they try to use it as concentrated as possible because it seems to do the most for the crops.
Yeah. Here, Leon wants to know, where was the fall of the Roman Empire in this great year? It's a good question. Yeah, where were they?
Almost right at the bottom. Yeah. As a matter of fact, classical scholars will use the fall of Rome to mark the end of sort of the descending cycle of this sort of ancient flourishing period to the beginning of the classical Dark Ages, and while it's sort of falling apart from about 200 A.D. on, when they shutter Plato's Academy, which I think is like 511, 516. Don't quote me on that. That's pretty much it. I mean, the kingdom's breaking up, and it's getting bad after that.
So I watched a little bit of a video that you had, and you were talking about some, giving a presentation talking about the different things that you all found before any of this stuff we originally thought should even be here. They were doing brain surgery and dentistry and batteries and gears. Tell us about some of this stuff that you found.
Yeah, it's very interesting, so we're taught sort of this linear view of progression in school, and yet they keep finding these anomalous things because archaeology is really getting good, and the more the world develops, the more stuff they find. And so a few examples are like electricity and batteries. The batteries supposedly wasn't invented until Volta in about the year 1700, and that's obviously Renaissance, post-Renaissance, and yet they found these batteries they call the Baghdad batteries because they're found in Babylonian rooms, and they're at least 2,000 years old. Some date them at 4,000 years old, and if you put if you fix them up and put an acidic juice in them, grapefruit or something like that, you can get a charge out of these things, and my friend Jason Martell has done this, that's actually about twice the electrical charge that you get out of Volta's early batteries. So that's way out of history. Or, if you look at geared devices, we were all taught geared devices were developed during the great clock-making era, 12, 13, 1400 A.D.
Right.
And it was sort of part of the Renaissance that led to the Industrial Revolution. Well, that idea held true until they found this thing called the Antikythera device off the Isle of Antikythera in the Aegean Sea near Greece. And it's clearly part of a shipwreck that's dated to about 100 B.C., and they know that from all the amphora and coins and other objects that are encrusted next to this thing, which they thought was just an anchor until some janitor at the Athens Museum had knocked it over once and realized that there's all these gears inside. And with that, they've dated it, and everyone's confirmed it's 100 BC. And it's a complex gear device, 32 precision gears, including one that appears to be a differential gear, and gears riding on top of gears. And that didn't come along until the Industrial Revolution. And so, yes, you do find all these things: orthodontics, dentistry, brain surgery.
Yeah, you actually they found stuff where they show that the people, they were drilling the teeth like modern dentistry was, and some dentists looked at it and they said, "Boy, that's pretty good work."
Exactly. Yeah,
that's crazy.
They didn't tell the dentist the dating on these, and so he had commented that it was good because they used different types of drill sizes. And these, I should point out, are skulls, 13 skulls that they found in Pakistan. They're dated to about 6,000 years old. I don't have it in front of me, but I think that's the dating. It's 6 or 8, I forget. And we have no clue how they drilled these rear molars so neat and perfect. And whatever they had put in them had long since diminished, but the tooth, being so hard, had stayed. So, yeah, it's the more advanced we become, the more we realize that maybe we're not so smart after all.
Well, yeah, that's a good one there. I wonder how these things get lost, though. I mean, you'd think, it'd be like going 1,000 years from now, and then you say, and the people just figure out cell phones or something. I mean, how would they possibly get lost to these civilizations? Are they mostly just destroyed through these phenomenal weather events and covered up and the rest of it?
I'm sure there are plenty of natural events that occur, floods, hurricanes, earthquakes, things like this that certainly cause things to deteriorate or become just, destroyed. But also, it seems that mankind himself is just not interested in things, or he's of such a material mentality that he's hoarding these things and he's burning them quite often. There's the great fires of Alexandria, many stories of Alexander the Great and others that are just getting these things and destroying them. And I guess that's so that they have the power, but it really messes up the record of the past. And yet, some of it escapes, and that's why we make these findings and have to keep rewriting history.
Scott writes in, your guest mentioned a book from 1994. Did you just get the date wrong? The Holy Science was published in 1949 and speaks of our comparison star as well of the Yuga cycles.
Actually, the original publishing of the Holy Science is 1894.
1894?
Yes.
Wow.
But there are updated editions since then. And, yeah, it's the first sort of modern book that seems to make reference to the cause of this cycle. And, quite an amazing little book.
So how do you think all of this, what you're looking at, this great year, what it has to do with this 2012 phenomenon?
Yeah, that's a good point. Clearly, the Maya seem to be pretty good astronomers, and they seem to be good timekeepers, and so they broke time into different epochs, just as the great year does, and just as we do today with calendars. And they're one of their calendars ends, I think it's the 13th Baktun,
right,
here in 2012, and they use the winter solstice. So it's December 21st, 2012. And, I really don't know why they do that, but if I had to just, take a stab at a guess, that it is a point where we're far enough out of the Dark Ages to where we're starting to realize that, mankind is really something greater, and maybe these stories about the past have some truth and validity to them. And we seem to be waking up, if you will. So, they could be using it to delineate a point like we do to delineate spring.
Mm-hmm.
Spring, the first day of spring is just a day we choose on the calendar. It happens that the sun is directly overhead, so that the length of day and night are roughly equal. So they could be just choosing a point, this winter solstice in 2012, as a nice way you can look at the sky, see this alignment, and use it as a point where, okay, you're far enough out of the Dark Ages and far enough into sort of the next phase where mankind's waking up that we're going to call it a delineation point. That's my guess.
Yeah. We hear a lot about now about the sunspots and how there's supposed to be a whole bunch of these guys coming around, the flares and the X-flares, which do affect pretty much no weather patterns here. How does this fit in with the Great Year thing? Does it at all? Have you looked at that?
There's a few people that have some thoughts and theories on this. One of them is our keynote speaker this year at the conference on Precession Ancient Knowledge. His name is Dr. Robert Schock. He's originally a geologist.
Yeah, we just talked to him.
Oh, did you?
A couple of weeks ago, yeah.
Yeah, he's just a brilliant guy.
Yeah, we liked him, yeah.
Yeah, and so, and he's just returned from Göbekli Tepe, as you probably know, so he'll be giving a whole talk on that and giving a hypothesis for, why this civilization may have been purposely buried and things like this. And he thinks that they were much more aware of sun cycles than we are now, and it could well be. If you think of it, and we're just barely out of the Dark Ages, and you hear these stories about, in a pre-Babel age, there's common knowledge of telepathy and clairvoyance, etc.
Yeah.
Maybe they're really far more tuned into these cycles than we are today.
So barely out of the Dark Age, if that's accurate with your Great Year whole paradigm, it would make sense then that we're still out there, killing each other and polluting and stuff like. Because we haven't really grown up quite yet. We're just kind of getting a little light here. It's only 6:30 in the morning.
Yeah, well, we've come a long way. If you look at 500 years ago, virtually every nation is at war with one another.
Yeah, that's true too.
Every county in Dookie is at war with one another, and justices, they throw you in a chamber and torture you, and there's no democracy, and health lifespans are half of what they are now, and plagues and famine and all that sort of thing. And so, yeah, we've come a long way, but nothing compared to what this myth and folklore would say we're capable of. We still believe we're human beings, limited to flesh and blood, and the Greeks would say, no, that's just what you think in the lowest age. That in the higher age, they will call the Silver Age the age of the demigods, and the Golden Age the age of the gods, where mankind realizes that he's so much more, and he's completely mastered finer forces, electricity, magnetism, things that we've just discovered since the Dark Ages. And
so we can really take these things out for a spin and see what they'll do. All these different powers that we believe that we embody in ourselves.
I think there's some real truth to it, and it has a spiritual message, actually. When you think about the writings of Jesus, who said, ye are gods, these things that I do, ye shall do also, and greater things. Most people don't believe them, and yet all this ancient myth and folklore talks about the greatness of what we are in higher ages. And so,
yeah. We just talked with a gentleman who was literally crippled with mercury poisoning for MS, and they told me he had MS, and he just kept telling himself that he didn't, and he could walk, and tell his legs to start moving, and he started visualizing it, and he got it to the point where he's able to walk, at least go to the doctor to find out what was going on, just from his will. And so, yeah, we have no idea, I guess, what we can really do here.
Yeah, I think we're capable of a lot more. And you think about just the last 100 years, we've realized that, everything's not just solid matter. It's made of cells and molecules, and those are made of atoms, and that is made of energy. And, it's actually starting to sound like myth and folklore once again. Yeah.
And it's only 6:30 in the morning on the big clock, so, hey, man, we're looking good. Well, that's a very positive way. So just in a minute or so, tell us a little bit about your kids' book. This sounds great. The Great Year Adventures with Tommy the Time-Traveling Turtle.
Exactly.
Oh, cool. And so for what age is this?
Yeah, we had fun doing it. We've got a great illustrator, Sky Walker. So it's from ages, anywhere from about 5 or 6 when they first start reading on up to 80.
Oh.
I actually do find a lot of adults who say, I was never clear what you were talking about on the cycle of the ages and what causes them, but when I read your children's book, now I understand it. And so it's we use Tommy as coming from the future to our present time to tell us how the solar system works, why we lost knowledge and why we're gaining it again, and not to worry that, the present age is sort of a time of fear and, but things are getting better.
Oh, that sounds nice. I want to read that. The Great Year Adventure. Well, thanks so much. We'll give you a little plug for your 8th annual CPAC 2012 thing on the show page, so people could maybe look at that, and that's coming up in October in Rancho Mirage, California.
Yes.
Walter Cruttenden, it's been fun having you on the show. Thanks for spending some time with us.
Thank you, Patrick.
And I'm so glad it's only 6:30 in the morning. I feel so much better.
Cockle-doodle-doo.
See, yeah, I like that. See, 6:30, and the great clock at 6:30, only up from here, baby. Ooh. All right, I love you all very much, and regardless of what anybody says, I think you're doing the very best you can. Thanks to Sharon, our web designer, co-producer, and my sweetie, who takes care of us, takes care of you, and makes everything work around here. We're going to see you tomorrow morning. We got a good lineup for you, and that happens at 9 o'clock Central Time.
Broadcasting from the beautiful Hill Country in Texas, this is OneRadioNetwork.com.